I'm excited to have Marina Lotus on today.
I think that um, indigenous people to our land are going to be like a key role in the saving of our land, because obviously they
Facts.
know how to treat it. We've got to go in reverse from like this farming on mass acres and things like that, and go back to kind of not necessarily foraging, because we're really advanced, so that's not
Yeah.
necessarily necessary. But I just feel like people need to focus on getting land and
Yeah.
divvying it up more fairly. Like, one person doesn't need to be in charge of hundreds of acres. And
Mm.
like, if everyone were able to have their own plot, then I feel like we would see a lot of change in that regard. At least, like, I'm trying to
Interesting.
organize communities on acres of land of people who want to live sustainable lifestyles. Like,
Ah.
say you set aside like 20 acres outside of city limits, and you get like, I don't know, 10 brown people who want to take care of the land in the right way, or also build small businesses for their communities,
Mm.
like, black owned weed farms and things like that, or like, beekeeping and things like that. Whatever people are interested in, I just feel like sorting them out the right way and getting them together in these small communities
Mm.
would be a great start in that, because we've just gotten to this big city thing, and we've got to go back to this small kind of
Hmm.
a situation.
It's curious that you said that because I feel like because a lot of the riots that have been happening in certain areas of the various cities throughout the country is that we're seeing this exodus of people kind of going back to that, trying to realize that it's like, oh, this isn't what I want at all. And going back to more of like the rural areas, trying to establish themselves, getting a homestead type of setup. And I really do think that that's a fascinating point you made about incorporating back with like the indigenous peoples, like being Native American myself. I remember growing up specifically, and when we did our Native American unit in elementary school, it was just a bunch of BS. I was like, whoa, whoa,
Let's
whoa,
build a
hold up.
teepee.
I was like, that's not what we did. That's not what I was taught. That's not what I was raised on. Like listening to the stories of like my ancestors. It's like that's you're full of shit, and I'm gonna call you out on it. And like, I remember my teacher had no
That's
idea
because
what to
white
say.
people are in charge of our education. That's another thing. Okay, so we need to diversify school boards and city politics and all that kind of stuff. We need more brown people, and not just the whitewashed people who are getting paid to have the white opinion. Get out
Interesting.
with that. Oh my
Well,
gosh.
well, it's the oh, I can't forget her name right now, but she just came out. She's a black woman. She's running as a Republican. It's really funny because she did this ad in Baltimore, and she was talking about this is the real Baltimore. And she's talking about essentially it's like what you just talked about, like the whitewash people that were selling out her neighborhood, and how like the certain like DNC policies have been stealing money and siphoning money and just robbing her. And but she didn't have an opportunity to do her thing her way in the DNC party. So it's interesting that she's running as a Republican, but she's like, nah, I'm trying to change the city. It's like black people matter, Baltimore matters. This is BS. I'm done with this. Vote for me. And she just walked through the city. That's all she did for her thing while she was talking about her vision. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's Be More right there. That's what I've seen. And it's one of those things where it's hilarious as I see it because we're having such a weird change in our political system and our social system that people are starting to recognize sincerity and genuineness, and it doesn't really have to fit a certain mold anymore, that people are really wanting the change. And I think that's something that to me is like incredibly fascinating because how I like to see it is that people are seeing more black Republicans running. I was like, yeah, because we technically started that party. We need to take that ish back and actually start to bring more voices to both sides of the political spectrum and like and beyond like the right and left paradigm. Because I hate that ish. I'm always going to be an independent.
Oh
For,
my god.
for me,
Like,
it
let's
has
talk
to be
about gang violence. It started with politics.
right. I mean, Ku Klux Klan was meant to go after black people, like that were politicians, but it's one of those things where I really do feel like we need more native representation, more Latin representation, all these different fields, because again, it's like we're only getting a one kind of like that white Anglo-Saxon approach that hasn't really changed in so long that
I
we
mean,
are a
we
diverse
need to have
country.
seats that are reserved for these people. It should
Interesting.
be the white people should be the minority. It should be like we have to elect a Native American into this position. There's no other option. That's what it should be.
Well, I think that's something that's fascinating because I just think that with the times changing and how things have evolved, we need to really start to look at how our political systems actually operate. And in terms of just the having fair representation and specialist, I think one of the things that I can't stand is seeing, we have trained politicians as politicians in our political system that literally were raised, bred, nurtured, and brought up and handpicked out of their frats and sororities to be these
Dude, have you
leaders of
seen
the
The
people.
Family?
Ugh, it's gross.
The series on Netflix called The Family. It's about this group of dudes who like get chosen to live together in like a political house, and they read the Bible, but it's like a shortened version that only has like certain pieces, and they just play football all the time.
No, I haven't. I haven't.
You should watch that because it was freaky, dude. I was like, this is where our politicians come from. This is where they get trained to be a
Well,
part of this.
think
That's
about
real
that
bizarre.
though. I think that's one of the things where it's like you can get into like the secret societies and like the skull and bones, like all of these different old school fraternities and sororities. Like they literally have been doing that since they were formed in like the 1800s. And I don't think that, again,
It's just in disguise.
well, it
It's
just
secret.
right, that's it right there. It's secret. It's right in the open if people want to look at the research. But again, it's considered and deemed like, oh, that's hokey. Oh, that's this or that. And it's like, no, that's literally, you can look in every list of these people and they all apply to these certain criteria. And I think that's something, again, that the few control the many. And I don't really think that people understand just the severity of it. Because talking about the families, there's like a handful of families that are literally like the CEOs or the COOs and all intermarried with all these big companies. And I always like to say royal families and royal marriages never died. They just changed form because now they're the corporate structure where it's like you have like Google CEO, YouTube CEO, all married, and it's like, but they're all under the umbrella of Alphabet and all these big companies, and it's like, yo, literally, that's how our mainstream media is. That's how our mainstream businesses are, where it's like they've stayed within that upper echelon and they've kept it within themselves. And what we come bringing it back, what we were talking about is like they've pinned everyone against each other with all these different things and beliefs and points of separation or difference that we have when truthfully we're all getting played by the same like percentage of a
Exactly.
percentage.
That's the thing. It's super intentional. So that's why I get frustrated when everyone thinks that I just care about black stuff. It's like, dude, that's not the issue at all. I don't know how many different ways I can say it that like
Right?
this is a human issue. I care more about people in other countries. I even recognize my own privilege as an American. Like I was
Right?
talking to this random dude from the UK who's been to like 160 countries, and he was like, "Do you even understand like how privileged you are as just an American woman? Like you can go anywhere, and if somebody tries to fuck with you in a way that you don't like, your country will come in and get a helicopter and take you away, or they'll get in trouble." Like Americans have so much privilege, but we don't know that because we barely ever leave the towns that we're from because we don't have money. And why don't we have money? Probably because we don't get paid what we deserve because we're working for people who don't have our best interest at heart. We're slaves.
Well, it's also
Sorry, I just
like
went off.
no, I feel that because it comes back to why our country got formed in the first place, and it's overtaxation and no representation. And it was literally the reason why we were like those how we were seen back in the day, at least those ho-dunk Americans who beat literally the number one empire of the world. Like just because we banded together and said F that. You're not charging me for my own money. Like, and I think that's something that I think again it comes down to education because how many people want to recognize that it's like this is just a systemic debt-based system. And if you don't play into that debt-based system and you really carve your own path, you change the way you operate, more of the community focus, more of the interconnected focus, the entrepreneurship aspect, you're out of that system. And you like I recognized this when I paid off my student loans because I grinded at a job I hated and literally like got to zero. And everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, that's such an accomplishment!" And I was super depressed because it was like the congratulatory aspect of it was like, "Yo, people are happy that I got to zero." Like I know doctors and like I have clients who are doctors who are still not there yet, and it's like, "Yo,
Yeah, dude.
what?"
I've been thinking about how poor my parents are. And like my mom has a master's degree, And like she still hasn't finished paying off her house. I'm just like, you know what? That's really not a goal
Wow.
for me. Like, I might get some acres if I ever pay off my debt. I don't even care about money anymore. So
Right.
it's just a made up, stupid, like, bro, what do you, I don't know. I don't understand what to even say with this because, like, I just don't care. If I have a student loan, I haven't paid a cent towards it. And I don't know when that's going to happen. Like, maybe if somebody just gives me $10,000, I'll be like, cool. But until then, I'm going to keep getting charged extra fees for it and everything
Ooh.
else that I owe money on. So why do I even care?
It's like bank overdraft fees. There's so many things that like, and again, I think one thing that really know that people don't recognize is that if we really wanted to break these systems, all we each need to do is just go withdraw all of our money from our bank accounts the same day. They're not going to have it. So where's your money at? Like, so I guess one of the things
That's
that,
why our government is trying to switch to being a cashless society so
yeah,
that we won't have the opportunity to do that anymore. And
that's
people
an interesting
aren't really
concept.
seeing the meaning behind that. You
Well,
know,
it's also the
I sit up all
security.
night and think about this stuff.
Well, it's also the security state and just how comfortable people are with the like the Orwellian technologies in our home. And I know multiple people have like the Alexas and all those things, and I'm like, they're listening all the time, and they just don't care. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa! Like you're saying, like there's been glitches and there's been hacks where people's audio has gotten out, and it's like, dude, you can talk about some private information, talk about some bank account stuff, like, and that information is out there. And that's, well, I mean, oh gosh, that stumbles into the next point that I really wanted to ask you was how do you feel about our data getting sold with like everything technologically? Like customized
You
ads,
already
like,
know. I feel like that goes hand in hand with censorship
mm,
a little bit.
interesting. Yeah.
The data situation has me really upset because like I personally have had a lot of issues with my phone and stuff. Like I've noticed my GPS tripping out and having me go like opposite directions and things
Hmm.
like that. Like I'll be like, I'm trying to go to South Seattle. It's like, okay, but we're gonna have you go up the 5. I'm like, that seems really suspicious. Why are we doing this? But yeah, the data situation is freaking me out. The 5G and all of that, like I don't even want to have a cell phone anymore, to be honest with you, but we have to.
I
Especially as an entrepreneur, that's where they got us with that, with the entrepreneurship, because we have to have a smartphone.
mm,
And I would honestly love to maybe use my smartphone less, like turn it off a lot of the time and just have it
yeah,
be kind of like a home phone, kind of more like a business thing where I just do
yeah.
what I have to do on it and then turn it off. And then have like a bum phone, like a T9 situation,
Yeah, like
so
old
that
school
I can
Nokia.
communicate and just call people through that. Yeah. Or like find a way to get a landline again, even though I travel all the time. I don't know how it's gonna work out. But
Hmm.
I'm really like I watched the documentary of Who Killed Malcolm X. I
Mm,
don't know if you've watched that one yet,
yeah.
but that is a spooky one because they talk about the surveillance. They had people who were actually, the ones surveilling MLK and Malcolm
Yes.
X and all those characters. And it's just crazy to think like Malcolm X knew what day he was going to die on, basically, and they knew who killed him, but they blamed other people for it and let that dude just go about his merry life in Mosque 25. Like
Oh,
when I think about those kinds of things, and then also think about like my activism and the types of things that I know and understand, especially like concerning space and all of that, I'm just
yeah.
like, there's going to come a point where I'm going to get targeted too. It's part of it. Like I don't know if I ever told you, but I used to work for Rachel Dolezal. Do you know who that is?
Oh no, no. Why don't you invite the listeners a little bit?
So Rachel Dolezal was that white woman who lived in Spokane, who basically got canceled because she claimed to be black. She said that everyone is like 1/32nd black. Everybody's from Africa. She's just an educated woman. And that got spun by our media because in Spokane, a quite racist city, politically speaking,
Yeah.
um, just didn't want her to make progress because she was the
Mm.
NAACP president that saved our chapter there.
Oh
And
wow.
she was also the police ombudsman chair at the same time.
Really? Okay.
Whoa. So she was in a position of power where she could actually bring about some change. And the police chief didn't want to see that happen. So he tried to dig up as much dirt on her as he could humanely find. And the best thing he could find is that she didn't have a good relationship with her parents because they were abusive and adopted black kids to use them as slaves and like all this stuff, man. It's
Wow.
crazy. Her story is wild. There's like a book that she wrote though, and there's a documentary about her that's a little
Mhm.
biased in the wrong way, but
Yeah. As
her book is amazing. Anyways, I worked in her
hmm.
house for a couple of years and really got to know her, and I was like, oh, so when you're an activist, they're either gonna kill you or make you feel like you're dead. Like she can never have a job doing anything. She just braids
Mhm.
hair. When I actually had braids, she braided it, and she's the best braider I've ever had. Every
Yo.
African braider or whatever that's ever done my hair, the braids would slide out within weeks. But with her, my braids stayed in for 3 months. She's like the best lock artist I've ever seen too. Like she's good, but she's canceled because our city politics were like, oh, we can't have her make it so that all of the shit that we've done towards black people actually comes out, you know?
Wow.
So
Yo,
I
that's
know all about
fascinating.
city politics and stuff because of her. So I'm just like, all right, I have to be really careful on how I go about this whole community organization situation
Ooh.
because if I go about it a certain way, I'm just going to get canceled and then all my credibility will be gone and I won't be able to make any change anymore.
Hmm. That's a fascinating point, and I think it. I mean, to me, when you're saying that whole entire story, I think of just like the kind of the political influence and just like the blatant attacks. It just echoes to me like Black Panthers and how all their leaders got murdered and how the entire party got infiltrated, because I don't think a lot of people recognize, really just because of how education portrays them and just like as radical extremists. It's like the first things they did were like breakfast programs at schools and like provided like childcare for families. Like literally that was like the start of it. And people don't want to recognize it. It's like FBI literally infiltrated that. CIA literally tapped all those people, put in those fake extremists as well. And it's like, and it comes back to the point of just like when you look at the censorship and the data control and the data manipulation, it's like everyone that was going into these protests and the riots, like they were all being tracked by their smartphones, every one of them. And
Dude, my phone got jammed during my live feeds all the time.
yeah, yeah,
And my
I remember
battery
watching
life
some of
would
those. And
like
it's
drain really fast.
interesting.
Yeah, I'm like, I was literally mid sentence. Are you guys serious? And then, um, like my phone would just die really fast while I was out there. Like, I feel like they can kind of control battery life to an extent too. Like, just kind of overwhelm your phone with data so that it dies.
Well, I think that's one of the things too, where it's the when you have that type of monopolistic control and the interconnectedness with like the government and the different agencies, that they do have those technologies. Like everyone's phone, like every smartphone nowadays has back doors that they're legally allowed to get into now. I'm trying to remember what exact legislation was, but it was the last administration that a lot of that stuff got passed through with surveillance. And again, like post 9/11 world, like once 9/11 happened with like the Patriot Act, that they just that they can both politically, both sides of the aisle can come together and re-up that one every time it comes up. Like that it gives them essentially like no limits and no restrictions to who they can spy on, who they can tap. And I think that's one of the things too, where we are willfully voting for this world with our participation in it. And I'm so curious is, it's what you were saying, because again, as a business owner as well, like pretty tough to not have a smartphone, considering it's just like, I mean, I really try to just use like internet. I try not to go on the internet on my phone. I really just try to use my like computer. And I try to just to make calls or texts or just like those random reading articles on my phone. But I think that's the really hardest part, is you have to get to this point where we have to have people understand that the instant gratification culture and these paths of least resistance aren't the right way to go about our technologies. It's a tough one.
It is. And I mean, like, I'm a model. Like, I could get hired by Nike or like some brand like that, which would be technically a brand that I may not even support. So
Right.
I'm playing into this culture in a different way. But
Mm,
at the same time, it's like I've tried to change the industry standard, at least as far as what I'm willing to do.
mm.
But it's going to take kind of a bit of a give and take. In the beginning, I'm going to have to do some things that I'm not necessarily comfortable with or things that I don't support so that I can build myself to get to a point to be like, actually, fuck all that shit, bro. So like I'm kind of doing like the quiet thing right now where I just have to do what I have to do
Yeah.
as far as art and business is concerned, so that I can get to a point where I'm like, this is actually how we should be doing things. Because I mean, with the way that I've seen history repeat itself politically and all of that, is that people, when they want to be an activist or they want to be like, you know, a certain type of person, they don't infiltrate from within. Like, I
Mm.
had a meeting with my modeling agency, Option Modeling Media, about Black Lives Matter. And I was like, what are you guys really doing for us? You know, and we talked for like 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, it's those kinds of conversations that need to happen. And you can't do that by removing yourself completely from a situation. It's like
Facts.
Elder Omari at the museum said to me, he was like, why'd you quit your job downtown? I was working at Mirabella, Seattle, which is a
Mm.
retirement place.
Yeah.
And the retirement places down there are real interesting with how they go about their business, right? So there, a lot of them are labeled as nonprofit organizations, which I think is really funny because it costs
Mm.
about 6 million or so to buy into your condo, and then you also pay about 6,000 or so each month. But as a worker there, I made minimum wage. I wasn't allowed to receive tips, and there were a bunch of other rules that were just like, interesting.
Mm.
I feel like this has some city politics involved, maybe.
Facts. Most definitely does. Oh,
And
yo.
everyone who worked there was pretty much black or like from another country. The
Right?
caregivers, the health staff, the servers, all of us. And I was like, that's really interesting, especially considering that now COVID is a thing and they weren't willing to give us hazard pay. They weren't willing to do anything to compensate us. We lost hours. So my shifts went from being like 10 hours straight to like working 4 hours in the morning, like 5 a.m. to like 9 a.m., and then waiting in the building all day with no compensation for my next shift in the evening. So I quit. I
Wow.
was like, y'all are like, we're all busing here from all across the state, really. Like, people come from as far down as Lakewood and as high up as Edmonds to work there. So there's no way that we're not all exposing each other to COVID because we're all going to different grocery stores. And that's the thing with these cities. You know, like they have all of these rich people living in the heart, and all the workers are busting from super far away or driving to take care
Mm.
of these people because we're
Environmentally.
basically slaves. It's
Yeah.
another type of slavery. I couldn't even afford my apartment in Tacoma on the most ghetto block while I was working there. That's crazy.
Yo, it's indentured
Like
servitude.
literally, I had somebody else living in my living room, and I had my boyfriend living with me, and then we also had another roommate in a two-bedroom apartment. I'm used to living situations like that because I realize as BIPOC people, we're going to be forced to have more people in a smaller space.
Mm.
There is the space. We have enough vacant homes in America for everybody to live somewhere comfortably, yet we don't. Why is that? Because they want us in apartments. They don't want us to be creative. They don't want us to think. They don't want us to make art. They don't want us to communicate. They want us all to be sad. They want us all eating garbage, having trash in our communities that they're not going
Facts.
to clean up. But it's really interesting how the places where all the rich white folks are don't really have those problems.
Well, you know what's
Convenient.
even funnier too is it's one of those things where I saw some number where it's like the most, what was it? I think like the most beneficial people to like the different laws and rules and regulations are actually like Indians, and not like Native Americans. I hate, don't call it Native Americans, Indians people. It was like
I
actually
hate
like
it.
it was like
It's
actually
terrible.
Asian Indians. They were like the top tier was like Asian Indians, like Asians, whites, and then everyone else. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like they've turned this entire society into a, I honestly like kind of see it as a clown show because it's like we're all indentured servants. Well, it's like seriously though, we're all indentured servants, and it's like what you were saying is that you're everyone's caught up in that rat race where it's like you have to work to provide, you have to do the stressful job, and the stressful job creates this XYZ chain reaction of just like poor health choices, the environmental choices that you choose to live in because it has to be a fad. And I mean, we've literally seen gentrification destroy this country on so many different fronts. But again,
The
I
thing that
guess
gets me is why people are okay with not raising their kids.
well, that's something that I firsthand can speak on too. That's really a lot more terrifying now. And because for those listening, I have 10 years in like childcare and education. I was fortunate enough to do it before college and after college. And when I went back into that industry after school, I had seen such a drastic shift with just basic parenting within like 6 years that it was absolutely terrifying. And I've never seen so many grown adults yelling at teachers. And I mean that. Like, and again, I'm working in like some of the areas around here in like that Ravenna Bryant, Laurelhurst area. So I was like seeing like, Sandpoint Elementary. I had like a very diverse mix because you have like the Magnuson low income housing combined with kids up in the hills in Laurelhurst area. So it's like that was to me like the most beautiful school because I was like, oh my gosh, you have a first generation immigrant kid, you have like the legacy wealth child here and they're best friends and they're hanging out with each other. But you could see the shift from the parents, and you could see all these other types, I guess you could say, all of these other types of like influences where you could see some of them on the rat race and then some of them like, oh, I like the food you're eating, but it's like his parents don't, or their parents don't afford that, can't afford that food, so they're eating the other types of stuff. And it's just seeing that type of influence where it's like, yo, it really is like that systematic control. When you're caught up in the rat race, you're always focusing on survival, you don't have the space to be creative, you don't have the time to be creative. And it's what people try to replace as, well, I guess I shouldn't say that, it's people have the time that they don't realize they could use to create, that they're getting caught up in another rat race of just like instant gratification, quick fix for like a dopamine rush. And you see this culture just kind of degrade. And I think it's across the board where it's like our entire civilization needs to have a drastic switch. I just hope COVID did that for a lot of people, to be honest. Like,
And I really hope so because, like, as someone who's been making art for the majority of my life, like my parents were never really supportive. They didn't really like what I was doing. They're always like, why can't you just like go try to be a lawyer or like go study computers or something? Like choose something more practical. Like I always got a lot of shade for doing what I've always just wanted to do. My dad still has a lot of animosity towards me, especially right now with what I'm doing. He's like, why don't you get a job? Come on, like you're stressing me out. And I'm like, yo, I'm chill. Like it's fine. Just it's all right. But I just feel like as a creative person, people oftentimes when they approach me are like, I don't know how you do it. Like, I wish I could do this. I wish I could make art. I wish, whatever. And I'm just like, but you can. Like, you may not be good at it, but consider like I may sing and be a vocalist and all that, but that took 12 years of training for me to get to where I am with it. And it's the same with all of the skills that I have. I just put in the time. I
right.
didn't focus my energy on what I was told to do and did what I wanted instead. And that's why I'm good at what I do now, you know?
Ooh, that's some powerful stuff right there. Because it brings me to the point, and it was the question I want to ask you is, you know, I always like to see it as our experiences they teach us opportunities. And one of the best ways to kind of heal and learn and grow and really turn that suffering into our own power, or turn that trauma into our own success, is by expression. And I'm just curious, is how's the art that you've created really been, I guess you'd say, birthed from your life experiences?
Ugh. Yikes. Let me just say, like, I have this one painting that I've done that is like a black figure holding a white figure, and the white figure is touching the black figure's chest, and there's like blue little shocks coming off of it. And then behind them is a bunch of melting clocks. And the concept is called Don't Go. So it's like the separation of people and like the relativity of time kind of joined together. So
Mm.
for me, my art is heavily influenced by what I go through. I'm really making art for the people who want to, see the metaphor in the poetry in what I'm doing. Like, if you're not deep with that, or if you're not very self aware, you probably won't appreciate the stuff that I make because it's really weird and like you just have to have a different type of consciousness to get it. So in these past few months, I've been creating like crazy. It's easy. Before, when I was working my job downtown in Seattle, like I didn't have the energy. Like I would go to the studio with Martial Law Band or whoever and sit there and just be like, I don't have the energy to make a song right now. I just sit there and just be like blank. Because I was working 6 days a week and it was exhausting because my boyfriend didn't have a job. So it was just like, okay, I'm trying to provide for all these people and take care of them. And then like I don't have the space in my mind for those creative avenues. So
Mm,
now since my life has shifted more to activism and community and trying to help other people make art, I'm seeing that I'm just really just out here just being myself. And my art has gotten so much better in time since. Like my modeling is more thoughtful.
mm.
The project that I'm making as an album really just like sprouted from this, and it's grown into this big collaborative project that's spread across 3 states. And so
Love it.
yeah, and I started finally publishing things that I feel like people are ready to hear because I've been sitting on. I have like several chapbooks written, but I never felt comfortable publishing them because I just felt like everyone was always so judgmental of each other and like
Mm,
people weren't ready to hear what I had to say. But now people are actually excited to learn about other people's experiences. So it's been really cool as an artist to be able to channel other people's stories and combine them with mine and try to, make this conceptual art for people to actually understand other people. It's been really cool because I had reached a point where I was like, maybe this really just isn't for me. I'm tired of trying to chase followers and like get
mm.
people to care about what I'm doing. Like I've finally gotten like a new appreciation. People are willing to pay for my work. And I just didn't see that before, you know? So it's been really cool.
See, that's one of those things that I think has actually directly come from the lockdown because there's a lot of people that are unemployed. They're on their, unemployment benefits and they have the time. They finally have a chance to breathe. And I think that's the one thing that I consider almost like the elites or the powers that be or all these corporations. I think they're batshit terrified of it because I think we've seen more and more people speak out and stand up and really learn and educate themselves. But not only that, break those barriers. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen the media so ramped up in like their civil war push and like their racial division push is that for the first time that I can remember, we have people listening. We have people actually trying to seek out other people's perspectives. We have different groups and people coming together. And like
It's
again,
been
like even
crazy
with
for me,
this,
man. People from elementary school have been hitting me up that I haven't talked to in years. And they're like,
right?
oh my gosh, you're so cool. I'm like, yo, we've been friends on Facebook for a minute. I've been saying the same things that I'm saying right now, but now you're willing to listen, and that's the difference.
Oh gosh, I
So,
feel that.
like,
I
while
feel
it's cool, I'm also like, y'all been sleeping on me, and you're just now seeing it. That's cute. It's cute.
that. Well, it's great though, because I think it's one of those things where it's, as I always say, real recognizes real. But there's been a point now where people are finally disengaged by force to not go to that grind, to not be too drained, to be creative, to not really give the excuses and, put up those walls of separation that they're kind of forced to either deal with your stuff or unfortunately as we've also seen people that just kind of get caught up in their vices and it's really been almost like it's been a very broad distinction that I've seen throughout this
It's
time.
definitely been a double-edged sword. I feel like there have been a
Yeah.
lot of people who have chosen to disengage, or people who were just maybe like not following the right type of energy for what they were trying to do, or didn't know how
Mm,
to seek out those avenues to find what they were looking for. So I feel like there are a lot of people who have definitely deleted their Facebooks and things like that, which is really unfortunate because I felt like there could have been more than what's actually like going on in like a successful way. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? Like
Oh
it
yeah,
could have
yeah.
been better, but it went as expected. I'm still very appreciative of everyone who's decided to engage and continue to fight the good fight, or just even be open to the fact that there are people who live different lives than
Yes,
them.
yes. And I think it's funny to see that because as I always try to, I've used social media purely as that like pushing knowledge out there and then business stuff. But I think that's the most important
Yeah.
thing, like even with this type of like chat room, Zoom interface, is like we're literally having conversations from people all over. We're reconnecting, like I've seen families reconnecting, I've seen friends
Oh
reconnect,
yeah.
reconnected with a ton of my friends from middle school, like via web chat. And it's just like, oh, yo, have you been? It's been like almost a decade. Like, and it's that beautiful thing where it's like, I feel like we're finally taking that pivot as a society to start utilizing our technologies for the right purpose. and to not get caught up
Yeah,
in
I
getting
mean, I
abused
feel
by
like
them.
people forgot how important people actually were to them. And I feel like sitting through this whole time alone made them realize, oh shit, like I actually do miss my homies from fourth grade, you know? And like, I kind of want to check on them. And like, I feel like people have also just realized how important art was because that's really what got them through this time.
Creative
And
expression,
so,
all that.
yeah, people finally realize, oh, seeing your photos or seeing your films or seeing your music, like that's
Mm,
really what's keeping people alive. That's the most important thing. And that's what always comes out of every movement like this. But, you
yes.
know, the thunder kind of came and it kind of subsided a little bit, but I feel like there's going to be another surge here soon of energy where people are
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, you know, art.
Yo, definitely. And I think that's the point of the outlets of creative expression that are so important for people to really tap into, because that is something within the human experience that makes it whole. And hopefully, again, like I always hope that people really utilize this time to tap back into that if you haven't yet, and to keep it going when you start, because I've seen more and more stuff starting to open up, but it's like to get back into it and to keep doing it despite things opening up. Like it's no excuse to just stop speaking to your heart, because that's so important. It's so important right
And you
now.
can start anywhere. You don't have to be good at it. Like people who are afraid of meditation make me so sad. I'm like, man, just I hope like my one goal for everyone is that they are able to like more sit with themselves and
Mm,
learn how to express themselves better because like we can't go into raising this next generation without that type of energy or our planet is
mm.
done. Like this is our last couple of years to fix it. Really, truly.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I see our generation as the real last generation to really kind of influence and help people heal and grow, because we're at that in between of like that old school, no technology, not really being mainstream, don't come back till the street lights are
yeah.
on, to like this overly attached technological world where there's so much coddling and helicopter parenting going on. Like I know that most of the people like yourself, like we understand a lot of these deeper lessons of the heart, because we all grew up in that old school approach that was very like cutthroat, very heartless, not like it didn't really help you with that love side so much. But it's given us, I feel like, the
God.
structure we need to like to well, it's true though, but it's like giving us the structure we need to create our own path and to really utilize both that old school and the new school wave to create that true path of like harmony, of like having the self creation, self reflection, self healing, but also just being kind to other people, like in nature, and just treating yourself in the world in the ways that really matter,
Treating them
compassionately,
with respect. The golden rule, man. Come
right?
on. Why is the golden rule lost in the sauce? Treat everything how you want to be treated. Like, people are so down to throw stuff away. It freaks me out. Like, every time people move to a different apartment, I feel like there's like, oh, just leave it all here. Like, I'm going to just purchase new kitchen stuff and like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, my mom has had the same stuff in her kitchen for her entire life. The same
Right?
plates, the same bowls, the same silverware. Like I think she just maybe replaced it for the first time because there were so many missing pieces. You
Mm,
know? So I have a hard time with people being so adamant about replacing everything. And like when I look for stuff to have in my home, it's usually to go find old vintage things because they have higher quality.
right, built to last, legitimately built to last.
Yeah.
Well, that's another
Like I have an
trap right
old vintage
there.
cheese grater. That's one of my like prized possessions because
I
the
love
new
it.
ones stuck.
Right? Well, I think that's something right there. That's another one of those traps that people don't want to recognize is, I've had conversations with a few different people, and one of my clients was literally in that industry of like big tech, and things are designed to break like within a year, within 2 years, because again, like we're built in that corporate debt slave society. And I think when more people are aware of that, they'll start valuing like making your own things again, going to like those small mom and pop shops that make stuff from scratch. Like, yo, it's so important.
Yeah, man. I don't know if you've ever seen my car, but I drive a 2001 Subaru Outback that is messed up. It's got like 250,000 miles on it. And my friends are always like, you need to get a new car. You should probably replace that. No, 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 no. And I'm like, I'll honestly probably just keep fixing it for the entire time that I'm alive because it's a car
It's a solid
and
car
it can be
too.
fixed. I
Right?
don't need to buy something new every time something breaks. So I'll probably be that person with the old
Mm.
ass Subaru.
Well, I mean, you just touched on like the fact that everything nowadays is really pushed to be, oh no, lease this, be on that contract, just get a new one. Oh, you can get a new car. Like, I can't tell you how shocked I am because I just buy like the unlocked smartphones. I'm like, it's a smartphone, it'll do what I need to do. But I see when I was looking for one, like $2,000, $3,000, I was like, my phone should not have a lease like payment plan. Like, but that's what people are doing, and then again, they're doing it every year. They're doing all this lack of
Yeah,
trade-in.
dude,
It's
mine's leased
crazy.
and I just dropped it in the case and the back of the phone shattered. I've had it for like a year. I have an iPhone 10. It's not even paid off. So I'm like, really, dude? Like now I
This
gotta like I gotta go get this phone fixed. I hope the insurance covers that because come on now, they're
That's
real picky on what
crazy.
they will fix.
That's crazy. Well, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure they were trying to pass it. They might have already passed it, but it was like the right to fix your phone because it was made illegal. Like again, like it's made illegal to fix my own property, like to go send it into some tech guy. But oh man, I digress with that.
It was a kind of light session here, Peter. Um,
Yeah.
Really?
no, I'm kidding. That was tongue in cheek. And
I was gonna say.
in fact, recap real quick for those who've missed it. We've talked about well, first dietary and the community. We started off with activism, and we got into foods and avocados and weather and milk and growing our own food. And in between there, somewhere, Marina hit the nail on the head at least 3 times. And living life on your terms, talk a little bit about Baltimore and traveling and how money is just a value prop, perception of value, and
Oh
getting into
yeah.
security state and data and Malcolm X and Black
Security state.
Panthers and something about a clown show and being indentured servants. Then an expression about art and books. And so
Love it.
that's just like brushing the surface of what we talked about. So it's just incredible.
Right. Right.
Just incredible. And so I have so many notes, but we'd have entirely another show. So what I can say is that I do refer to my phone as the smarter than me phone. Um, and
Understandably so, man. The government
yeah,
really is rocking with it. So
yeah, it's not a smartphone anymore. It's a smarter than you phone. Have a happy always.
Oh yeah.
That concludes this episode of Creatives Chat. Thank you for watching. Join us every Thursday at 3:33 p.m. Pacific Daily Time as creative minds get together and chat about who knows what. View more episodes on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again to our sponsors for making this show possible.
Thanks for joining us.